We're going to get started. Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Andrea Sampson. I'm the CEO of Talk Boutique and your host and moderator of today's sense-making conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, as I was saying earlier, it's an absolutely beautiful day here in Toronto. It's warm. There's a bit of a humidity. Summer is definitely on its way. And with the warmer weather, many of us are pulling out those lighter summer clothes. And with, 3 months of isolation, I'm noticing that some of them are fitting a bit differently than they did last year. Not sure about you. Many of us found ourselves with some unexpected time on our hands in those 3 months. And cooking and baking became a great way to reconnect with our family and to, rediscover our homes that we probably had not spent so much time in for a while. I remember the banana bread phase. Do you all remember that? You couldn't open up social media without somebody showing a delicious loaf of banana bread that they had just pulled out of the oven. I think we went through 3 or 4 loaves here. My daughter loves to bake, and there was a lot of banana bread in our house. And then it went to the sourdough bread. Do you remember that? I think some of you are still in that phase. And then there was that Dutch oven bread. I think that went around, and there were so many other recipes. Frankly, it's all a bit of a blur for me. There were so many great recipes and so much yummy food. And well, let's face it, we were looking for comfort, and some of the baking and the eating was actually a coping mechanism as we spent time in isolation. Emotional eating is something we find ourselves doing from time to time, and it's okay until it becomes a crutch that we turn to in difficult moments. Our health, our mood, our self-esteem can be impacted by using food as a coping mechanism, not to mention the impact on our body and the weight we carry. Our guest today, Sandra Elia, is going to talk to us about emotional eating and how we can break this unhealthy habit. She reminds us that weight gain and obesity are not simply about body weight or body image. They're about human vulnerability. And behind every obesity statistic is a real person living with physical, mental, and emotional challenges. Surviving the pandemic and living in isolation had many of us look for comfort in food. And now we need to move back to the healthy habits that some of us let go of. Today, Sandra's going to help us to discover a more optimal normal in our eating habits that has sustained us, that is sustainable, post-COVID. As one of the world's first and Canada's #1 certified food addiction counselor, Sandra is a true pioneer in the field of recovery from compulsive overeating, addictive eating, and obesity management. Sandra has had her own journey with food addiction, so she deeply understands the complexity of the challenges of eating for health and for joy, and she helps her clients find a balance between both of these. Sandra, help us to understand what's been going on for many of us with a focus on emotional eating, and how can we get back to a more healthy diet?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. Let me tell you, this time of COVID-19 and self-quarantine, there is a significant uptake in emotional eating, addictive eating, and I think what's important to understand is this is the perfect storm. If you wanted to do an experiment to drive people to eat for comfort, you would put them in isolation, you would take away their routine, you would take away their friends, you would give them very little exercise and fresh air, add a whole lot of uncertainty and fear, and people would eat for comfort, absolutely. And understand, no one is here to point a finger if you are using food as a comfort or pastime. I think that's part of the human condition. It only becomes a concern when that comfort eating becomes what I call destructive eating. And so how does that look different? Well, destructive eating comes with consequences. So those consequences could be, it affects your energy, it affects your mood, you can start seeing yourself snapping at people, you just have very little energy, and your health starts to suffer as well. What we know during this time of COVID is people haven't been able to manage their chronic diseases in the way that they would in the past, because things at the hospital. A lot of doctors have put everything that's non-emergent on hold. But those chronic diseases are still going on in the background, and of course are exacerbated by poor eating for anyone. So again, if you're eating for comfort, that's fine. But can you keep this up for months to come as things are starting to ease up? We're also coming to terms with the fact that life, pre-COVID life, is still quite a ways away. I like to say everybody needs an eating plan throughout their lives. And so my niece just had a baby, and I love how she has put an eating plan together. She makes sure he gets the right amount of carbs, fats, proteins, fruits. Why? So he can thrive. Well, everybody needs an eating plan. It doesn't matter your age. You need an eating plan that evolves with you through the different stages of your life and through all your different and specific health needs. And everybody on this call is intelligent enough to know what they should and shouldn't eat. So what's the problem, right? Where's the difficulty if lack of knowledge isn't the problem? It's the how. How do I actually stick to my eating plan when I don't want to? How do I stick to my eating plan when I'm stressed and I'm overwhelmed and I'm bored? Maybe I've yelled at the kids and fought with my partner, and I just want to be comforted by food. I know I have this plan. I know I can thrive on that plan, but I just don't want to. And so that's really the crux of overcoming emotional eating. It's also taking a step back and becoming an observer to our thinking. We're a culture that is obsessed with what we put in our mouths. And what I'm suggesting is what we feed our minds is just as important. And, thoughts always affect our behaviors, and that includes emotional eating. So I prepared a quick little slide, and it's called the self-quarantine emotional eating traps, that I thought would be really helpful for people to understand, because if you know where the traps are, you can plan for them, you can avoid them, you can see them coming. I kind of equate it to pothole season. Anybody who lives in Southern Ontario, we know spring comes, there's going to be huge potholes, and man, oh man, if you hit one of those potholes, it is like, it's painful, right? You worry if you've damaged your car. And if you've hit it once or twice, what do you start doing? You start mentally preparing in the morning. Oh yeah, there's that pothole. I have to change lanes. I'll have to take another route. And that's the way I want you to look at these traps, as potholes that you've fallen in a couple of times, and now you're going to start planning for them. So first, self-quarantine trap. This is a once in a lifetime event. Nobody on this call has ever lived through a world pandemic. My gosh, if there's ever been an excuse to bake all the banana bread you can get your hands on, this is it. This is when we would do it. So that once in a lifetime trap. And it's important to know the trap so we don't fall for them anymore. Boredom trap. Wow, right? Who hasn't been bored? I think that's my daughter's favorite saying. I'm bored, what to do next? Know that, the boredom or the comfort that you get from food is very short-lived, right? If you think about it, you're only being comforted as you're eating the food. As soon as you swallow that last bite, for a lot of us, that's when the remorse sets in, the guilt sets in, feeling bloated, feeling lethargic. It's like, wow, that comfort is only happening so long as it's in my mouth, and then it kind of ends. I've blown it trap. So this is the only place in our lives where we refuse to course correct. So what do I mean by that? Let's say you overdid it at lunchtime, and then you think, well, today's ruined. What's the point? What's the point of me trying to eat healthy for the rest of the day? I blew it at lunch. I might as well blow it at dinner. I'll start over tomorrow. And then you wake up and you're like, well, it's Thursday. Who starts over on a Thursday? I might as well wait till Monday. I'll start on Monday. That's when everybody starts over. And then Monday comes and you're like, oh, but that's the 23rd of the month. No one starts on the 23rd of the month. I'll start on the 1st of the month, and on we go. I know for myself, I was stuck in the I've blown it, the diet will start tomorrow trap for over a decade. And if you think about it, that's the only place we do it. When have you ever been on the highway, missed your exit, and said, that's it, I've blown it. I'm staying on this highway for the next 5 hours to really blow it. But that's what we do with food. I don't care trap. I don't care. And that's really a lie we say to ourselves. Of course we care. We care about our health. We care about being there for our family. We care about the example. It's just in that moment of hopelessness that we might reach for the I just don't care. when things return to normal trap, right? So for now, right, and that one is so easy because when this all started, it was supposed to be 2 weeks, right? And 2 weeks turned into 4 weeks, turned into 3 months, and now we don't know when life. So this return to normal might be a long time, which leads right into the post-COVID trap. So, think about the last holiday season, those 2 weeks between Christmas and New Year's, where everybody kind of lets loose. They let loose of their routines. They drink more, they eat more, they're merry. Why? Because they know January 1st, I'm going to get back on track, so it's fine. And then January 1st comes and we're like, holy moly, this is really tough. This isn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. That's after 2 weeks. So if we take that approach to this time of self-quarantine, which can be months and months, that could definitely be a problem. So let's start rethinking this time. Can we use this time to reset? I really do believe it's a time of getting back to basics. I think that if you're a creative spirit like me, it's kind of an interesting time to figure out, how do I bond with my family? How do I find interesting things for my daughter to do? A lot of my clients are using this as a time to recharge. Like, they actually have time for exercise and meditation. There's no more commuting. There is time to cook. Like, I've discovered I'm a good cook. I had no idea, really, none. I thought I was a terrible cook, but after 3 meals a day for 3 months, I'm getting really good at it. And I'm connecting with family. Whenever I'm feeling kind of down, I know that's my time to connect with somebody who I know is lonely, to be of service to that person. And here's the tip. Always make your plans first thing in the morning. If nighttime is a high-risk time for you to emotionally eat, which it's for everyone, make a plan in the morning when you're fresh, when you're energetic, when you have the foresight to know. That's when you make your plan and you make your commitment for the Zoom call, for the social distance walk, for that phone call. And you don't want to let that person down, which is going to steer you away from emotional eating. And just that whole rephrasing and being careful in terms of, what are we feeding our eyes, what are we feeding our ears, and what are we feeding our mouths. So with that, I'm going to pause and allow Andrea to start the conversation.
Well, thank you. That was really enlightening. And I mean, again, I think we've all been experiencing the overindulging and feeling maybe a little bloated and a little bit guilty as we're going along. And I love the analogy you used about, the blow it. Of like, of course, we're just going to stay on that highway and keep ourselves going because we missed that exit. And I think many of us have missed the exit right now. Yeah. And, in terms of a first step, because we're all now coming back, and I was reading some of your things this morning, and one of the topics that you were talking about is that when you have been on a bad diet for a while, our body is in a place of craving, right? Because we've been eating sugar and salt and fat, and these are the comfort foods, of course, but then our body gets into craving. So what do we do? How do we stop those cravings, or at least lessen them, I guess?
And so, a steady diet of ultra processed foods, junky foods, changes the palate. And when we change that palate, then we go back to whole foods that just don't taste right. But a couple of things that you can start doing right now is put a barrier between you and your trigger foods. So what's a trigger food? Trigger food is a food that when you have it in your house, you obsess about it, you think about it. Once you start it, you find it very hard to have a reasonable portion. Sometimes eating that, you're down the path. Like, I have clients who say, oh, if I start on that bread basket, I know it's off the rails for the rest of the dinner. So how can you put some barriers between you and your trigger foods? If you live alone, then you really have to take a moment and say, I do not bring these foods into my house. These are not safe foods. No one can resist potato chips. Okay. So the last time I was in Shoppers, there was a limit on toilet paper and potato chips. I've never seen that before in my entire life, that people couldn't get enough, like, they're rationing potato chips. Why? So, once they're in your house, they've been manufactured for you to eat the entire bag. So there's no shame and no guilt. So the power that you have is not to bring them into the house. If you live with other people, I get it. But the biggest favor and the most loving thing you can do for your loved ones is put a barrier between them and these industrial made, nutrient poor, disease causing foods. Let's call them what they are. Stop calling them treats. They're industrial made, disease causing foods. And so what does that look like? Maybe you have a pantry in the garage. Maybe you have one in the basement. I have a client, she's 70, she suffers from arthritis. So what she did was she put her trigger foods in the freezer in the basement. So that staircase is very difficult for her to navigate, one. And then two, she's got to wait for the food to thaw. And I thought, you're a genius. You put a physical barrier and a time barrier between you and your food. The next thing is start challenging your thoughts. Those thoughts that lead to those emotional eating episodes. And some people will tell me, but I don't think I think anything, I just do. So here's a great way to uncover those thoughts. Put in a boundary. Maybe your boundary is, I do not eat past 8 p.m. Full stop. Okay? Maybe it's a new boundary you're going to try out for this week, because the truth is nobody should be eating past 8 p.m. and I can give you another whole lecture as to why, but you're going to decide I'm not eating past 8 p.m. Now you're going to hear those thoughts. Those thoughts are going to be like, oh, no, Sandra didn't mean Friday. Like, you can't start on a Friday, right? Like, are you crazy? No. Or you might hear the voice say, oh, but you have leftovers. Like, there's still a piece of cake. Once that cake is gone, then we can start this rule. Or it could be, oh, no, sorry, my husband pissed me off. I got to eat. Like, there's no way I'm keeping this boundary. So now you can start hearing those thoughts and you can start challenging those thoughts.
Well, I think I've had some of those thoughts. And I think, I think when we were chatting the other day, you told me about a Google, that Google survey that was done. And I thought it was fascinating. Maybe you can tell our listeners about that.
Yeah. So Google, my niece actually used to work for Google in San Francisco. And so all their kitchens are fully stocked. They feed their employees all day long. But they wanted, of course, their employees to be healthy. So what they did in the kitchen was they had refrigerators with glass, and they put anything that had sugar below the frosted glass. So when you walked in the kitchen, you could only see water through the clear part, and then through the frosted were all the sugary drinks. Then they took the cookies, they put them in canisters that were solid color with lids, and put out fresh fruits. And so with those barriers, those visual barriers and the barrier of the lids, they reduce the consumption of sugary drinks and sugary snacks by 30%. There's something about this barrier. Imagine just yourself, minimizing how much emotionally eating you do by 30% by simply putting a barrier in.
That's incredible. I mean, it's something I'm thinking about, just as you're saying that, like for my, my own kitchen, of like, where can I just create those little barriers from me reaching for that extra cookie, or the, I'm not a pop drinker, so that's not a problem for me. I drink lots of water, but maybe it's the other things in the fridge, the ice cream.
Yeah, I was going to say freeze them, but the ice cream's already frozen.
Another question I have, because I think it's, when we get into the area of eating and how we nourish and feed ourselves, many of us grew up, I remember growing up with a mother who was eat everything on your plate. You've got to eat those 3 square meals a day. And if you don't eat properly, there was always the threat of death. Like, my God, if you miss a meal, you're going to die. And so it's very ingrained in me that, I have to eat properly and have to eat regularly. And yet, more recently, we're hearing more and more about intermittent fasting and ways of, so, tell me a little bit about intermittent fasting. I don't know if this is something that you talk about, but yes. I think it's a really interesting concept. Maybe you can help our guests understand what that is and why it might be important for them.
For sure. So intermittent fasting is the number one question that I often get. And so what you need to understand is every time we eat, we raise insulin, right? And insulin is what we call the fat hoarding hormone. Okay. Certain foods raise insulin a little bit. Some insulin goes up really high with other foods. And so there was a time in history, let's go back to 1960s, where people only ate 3 times a day. That was it. There was no snacking, walking and eating, meeting, eating. It's like people just ate 3 square meals a day, which was great. So they'd wake up and have a little spike in insulin, which was breakfast. Then it would go down because they didn't snack. Another spike at lunch. And then dinner would be the biggest spike. But that was okay because guess what? They didn't eat at night. And so they would eat their last meal by 7 p.m. and they would have a 12 to 14 hour fast, which meant their insulin levels got nice and low. Why is it important for you to have a break in the insulin? When you consistently keep your insulin levels up, you get something called insulin resistance. And then the next step is being pre-diabetic and then diabetic. And 1 in 3 adults in North America has diabetes. Can you imagine that? 1 in 3. So what we do today, so you fast forward 1960, 2020, we wake up and we have breakfast, then we have a mid-morning snack, then we have lunch, then we have another snack after lunch, then we have a big dinner. And then what do we save? The really carby stuff that shoots your sugar so high for night, just before bed. That's what we save it for, which means we are flooding our system with insulin on a consistent basis, which leads to that insulin resistance. And remember, fat hoarding hormone. So it's just going around, okay, I got to clean up the blood again. Let me store some more fat. Let me store some more fat. So the best intermittent fast that you can do is have dinner and then do not eat again till breakfast. Full stop. Some people choose like alternate day fasting. I think you have to be very careful with that. I think that needs medical supervision. I think that if you have any sort of eating disorder, it will be exacerbated by that kind of eating. If you identify as a food addict, that would be bad news. But if you want to do something that is absolutely safe and beneficial for your health, have dinner and do not eat another bite until breakfast.
You talk about food addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think it's something that most people don't really understand. I don't think that I fully understand it. I mean, we have to eat to live. Yeah. And yet addiction, so we can't give up food. It's not like I can say, well, I'm just going to, I'm going to go to Food Anonymous and never eat again. That's not going to happen. So what is a food addict and how do we manage that? And how do I even know if I am one?
Yeah, so I think you bring up an excellent point. The name does make it very difficult. And the truth is no one is addicted to whole foods. We're not. We're addicted to chemically engineered foods. They've been chemically engineered to overwhelm our reward center. And they're food-like substances. So I often hear from healthcare professionals, we need food to eat. Okay, that's fair. We do not need Doritos to live. Like nowhere. And it's tricky because a Dorito looks like real food, but you can live a happy life and never touch a Dorito again. So I often tell people that I knew I was a food addict because I used food the way an alcoholic uses alcohol. I used food to alleviate pain, to numb out, as my only and biggest coping mechanism for life. And there are a couple of hallmarks of addiction. The first one is withdrawal. So if you try to stop, let's say you try to stop sugar, and you experience physiological and psychological withdrawal that is so painful that it drives you to eat those foods again. That's one of the hallmarks. The second big hallmark is consequences. So do you have consequences from your eating and your weight that you desperately do not want, and yet you can't seem to stop, even though, I'm diabetic, even though I have crippling depression, even though my mobility has been taken away from me, even though I can't help my kids at the park, I still can't stop eating. That is the sign of addiction.
Well, that's powerful, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because I think that, you talk about it and I love the term you're using, food-like substance, right? Because it's not food.
No one's addicted to real food. No one can have 6 portions of salmon or, I always give the analogy, can you eat 6 apples in a row with all the chewing, all the fiber? 6 apples? Your body would be screaming, stop. 6 warm, gooey cookies out of the oven with the same amount of calories? No problem. Not a problem. And it's the same amount of calories.
So if that's the case, and you talk about sugar, I mean, I think so many of us have sugar addictions because there's sugar in so much of
everything.
What we eat. And there is sugar in everything. And so, carbs are essentially sugar. Yeah. So how do we stop? How do we get out of those sugary, salty places? How do we stop those addictions? Because that's what they are.
Yeah, I mean, if you do really identify as a food addict, we really need you to shine a light over your entire life, and really also look at some of the drivers that may be causing you to use food for comfort, right? And addressing those. My program sits on 3 pillars. So the first pillar is we have to give up our trigger foods. We have to give up our drug. This is a drug to me, maybe not you, but to me. And with any addiction, if we're using our drug, we can't really do any other work, right? You can have a hangover from an emotionally eating binge. You can, absolutely. You'll wake up, you'll feel lethargic, you'll foggy brain, your performance will be lower. And so if you're in the food, there's not much we can do. So the first step is always give up your addictive substance. The second step is you need a community. You need to be tapped into people who understand, have walked in your shoes, who gets up every morning, tries to do exactly what you're going to try to do and support you. And that's challenging right now. I get it. But this is where that creativity comes in. How can I connect with people in new and more powerful ways? And the third pillar is mindfulness and spirituality. So addictive eating is mindless eating. And so one of the antidotes is that mindfulness and that presence when we eat. And there is also a spiritual component. So in my program, we don't talk about religion. Spirituality is the healing balm that people sometimes need because their self-esteem and their self-worth has taken a beating because of the way that they've used food.
So mindful eating, what does mindful eating look like?
Yeah. So what's great about mindful eating is it brings you right down into the moment, and it brings you back to basics. Like, understand that, like 50, 60, 70 years ago, there was only mindful eating. Nobody sat in front of the television and had a ton of distractions. So if one little hack for you that everybody can do that's super easy is, once you prepare your plate, to take 3 to 5 seconds and to really look at your food. Just really look at it. Signal to your brain that you're about to eat this abundant, beautiful amount of food. And in fact, when I attended the obesity conference in Las Vegas last year, one clinic who did solely mindful eating, one practice that people adopted was taking a picture of their food. And they found, nobody was going to look at this picture, but what they found was just getting the camera angle right, taking that moment, looking at the picture and seeing it was pause enough to bring them into that moment and to help their brain understand that they were about to consume food. And next, mindful eating is engaging all 5 of your senses. So your eyes, your taste buds, your smell, even the sound, touch. So have you ever created a really big meal and been in the kitchen for hours and then sat down and go, I can't eat, like I'm not hungry at all? And that's because you've engaged all of your senses for hours in the kitchen, that by the time you sit down, you're full and you don't know why. I've heard that. I'm not much of a cook, but I've heard cooks say that over, and I always felt so bad. I'm like, oh, but we're going to be eating. And they're like, I can't eat right now. You can use that to your advantage with mindful eating.
It's funny you say that I love to cook. And I used to make a lot of very large meals for family and friends. And that often happened to me. I was not hungry at all by the time everyone was sitting down. I actually was like, I can't even look at it, And so I find that interesting. I had no idea. I thought it was just me and just some strange idiosyncrasy.
No, because all your senses were just overdone. They were overdone. They were done. There was no more that you were longing for.
So what are some first steps that people can take right now? So if you were to give a practical solution to say, all right, we're coming out of quarantine, we're coming out of this self-isolation, and we're coming into summer, and we know summer equals barbecues, it equals sitting around the swimming pool or at the beach, and that typically isn't carrot sticks and hummus, just saying.
I know.
So what are some practical tips we can give people as they start to come back into this, now not quite post-COVID, but hopefully soon, post-COVID world?
I always say that this brain is the best Google search there is. So if I ask this brain an intelligent question, I get an intelligent answer. So whenever I go to a party or even a restaurant and I look at a menu, I always ask myself, what are my healthiest options? And especially with the menu, it's so weird. Everything kind of comes to the surface. So I've been out with family and friends, and I'll hear somebody say, there's nothing here for me, so I'm just going to go to town. And then they hear me order, and they say, but how did you, right? Because I'll do like a starter, and then I'll get 2 sides of vegetables, and then I found a protein, and I've created this meal on my own. And yes, maybe it's more expensive, but my health is worth it. And then I have other people go, oh, you know what, I'm going to cancel. I didn't think there was anything healthy on this menu. But you see, they didn't ask the question. If you tell this Google search, there ain't nothing here, your brain's go, oh, you're right. Please get the burger and fries. There's nothing here. Don't look anymore. We already have the answer. And it's the same when I go to parties, right? Because I want to be a part of. So when I go to parties, I do want to let loose and I want to have a good time. So I kind of just put a simple rule. I'm not going to have anything with sugar and flour. And then I'm going to eat everything to my heart's content. And, people are becoming more aware of healthy options, right? I'm going to my niece's for, a 10-person barbecue. She texted me. She's like, do you want chicken, hamburger, steak? Right? I'm going to bring the kale salad because I know that salad's important to me. I think we can do it. I think just ask that intelligent question. I've even been in situations where, I'm at the hospital. I've been there all day. And then I go to the food court and I'm standing there going, oh my God, I'm tired and I'm overwhelmed. And I still ask the same question. What's the healthiest thing that I can have here? And all of a sudden I go, yeah, Starbucks has nuts, and oh, they have salad, and oh, they have this. And I put something together. It might not be perfect, but I feel good. And at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's not about calories. It's not about weight loss. It's about putting a plate of food together that brings you peace, that you feel peaceful about. A plate of food that has a beginning and an end and allows you then to go on to do things that are really important to you.
So what about alcohol? Because that's going to play into it as well, especially as it gets warmer, because we know that's going to be a piece of it. And alcohol is filled with sugar in many cases, and it's got calories. So how do we manage that?
So I would stay away from anything that looks like a dessert. So a pina colada, anything that's blue, I just like all that. No, there's a lot of health benefits, and it's a different kind of sugar, as my dietitian has explained to me, in red wine. That's a very different kind of sugar than what you would find in a margarita, which is pure sugar. Then, if you like to have drinks like, a vodka soda is one of my favorite go-tos with lime. I find it super refreshing. Maybe, tequila is another one. There are, again, I'm not saying don't drink. If you like to and can drink responsibly, ask the Google brain, what's the best drink I can have right now? And, again, the margaritas and the pina coladas, just have a piece of cake. Honestly, it's probably less sugar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess that goes for, it suddenly brought me to, the lineup at Starbucks, right? Where all of these sugary drinks, and every one of them has got to be filled with calories.
I was so upset when they had, I think it was called the unicorn drink. And I walk into a Starbucks and my daughter goes, I want the unicorn drink. And I said, no, honey, that has caffeine. You can't have it. And I remembered reading it was 56 grams of sugar. And the barista said, no, this drink is for kids. What? 56 grams that you're just going to drink, right? So whenever we drink something, it hits our system faster. It lights up our reward center faster, becomes more addictive. A soda pop will hit your brain in 7 seconds. So I can't even imagine what this unicorn drink, they took it off the market. I think they heard a lot of backlash. Nobody should be drinking 56 grams of sugar.
Can you give us just I don't know what 56 grams of sugar is. Give me some comparisons.
For sure. An apple has 15.
Wow.
15 grams.
Wow. And what would a soft drink have?
A soft drink, I think, is at about 24. So, and that's what we should be aiming for, our daily amount, 24 grams of sugar. Now, remember, your daily intake of sugar also includes things that are naturally occurring in sugar, like a nice Greek yogurt might have sugar in it, fruits, vegetables, right? So you got to remember the 24 grams isn't just for a treat. That's actually just part of your daily diet as well. Yeah. So it's
56
criminal.
grams of sugar, it's already, it's more than double the amount you should have in a day. And you're giving it to a child in one drink. So be aware of that, right? Because these are places where calories live, where sugar lives, that we're not even aware of. And I think, lots of us have the healthy habit of drinking water.
Yeah.
But, I think it's something that, what we drink is often not counted in what we're consuming, right? We forget that it's part of the consumption.
Well, we know there is a strong tie between sugary drinks and childhood obesity because they're just drinking their calories. There's no chewing, there's no fiber. It's quite dangerous to be giving it to our children, especially. I saw a great question pop up about Diet Coke, which is my favorite topic.
There we go. So let's see. So how bad is Diet Pop? Yeah, I'm addicted to Diet Coke. This is from Beth.
She already knows how bad. Oh, it's so bad. It is so bad. Let me tell you. I don't even know where to start. It's so bad. So when I worked at Renascent, which is a drug and alcohol treatment center, I created their food addiction program. People who had to detox off diet soda, it was so painful. It was hard. So harder than any other food substance. So that tells you how much chemical is put into that. Now, here's the other thing. Research shows a correlation between obesity and drinking Diet Pop. How is that even possible? Diet Pop has 0 calories. Why do we see this correlation? Couple of reasons. When you ingest something that is sugary, your insulin reacts in the same way. So you're still going to get that spike of insulin from that Diet Coke. And what does insulin do? Fat hoarding. The other thing is, what does Diet Coke taste good with? It doesn't taste good with celery. If you're drinking Diet Coke, you want potato chips, you want French fries, you want salty, you want, right? It's that taste in your palate is going to drive you to want to eat ultra processed food. So you might be, and I was #1 culprit. McDonald's, I'd order my meal, Diet Coke, please. And I always said, oh, I just saved myself 300 calories. No, I didn't. It would spike my hunger later on. It would spike my cravings. Those 300 calories I thought that I had saved, I would make up for it by the drive that was ignited by the Diet Coke. So bad. Way more bad than you think.
So Beth, you might want to be off the Diet Pop. It says. She says she hasn't had anything since January.
Woo! Good for you.
Good for you. Good for you.
That's not easy. I want to honor how difficult that is.
And she's putting a note there saying headaches. I have a feeling that she got a lot of headaches going off of it, which I'm not surprised because the chemicals there, of course. Yeah. So we're almost out of time. I've got one last question for you. And I think this is, for many of our listeners, they've got little kids at home because suddenly we have our kids with us all the time in this time of isolation. And kids, like you said, they're hungry all the time, and they're looking for yummy food. And so how do you manage, with children to create those healthful eating habits early? What are the ways in which you can get these picky eaters to eat something, but eat something healthy?
Yeah. So here's the deal. We are the parents. My daughter has no money and no freedom. So whatever I bring in the house is what she eats. So I do, of course, I have foods that she likes. I'm not perfect. I'm not saying that by any stretch of the imagination, but I have to own the responsibility. I can't bring in Oreos and say, but you should only have 3, because those Oreos are designed for her to eat the whole box. So if I don't want her to have Oreos, I don't buy them. Children need 2 things: attention, and they also have to feel a sense of autonomy. This is really important. So what my daughter and I have done during this time of COVID, because she would like it to be a buffet from morning till night, we write out when meal times happen. So breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner, snack. She gets, 3 snacks a day. Then she writes out the snack ideas. And the caveat is the snacks are mini meals. So is it almonds, apples, cheese strings, this? And she does get 1 treat a day. And we have a list of the different treats that she can pick from. So she has a sense of autonomy. One of my clients taught me a great trick that there's food you can have anytime. It's called anytime kind of food. And then we have sometime foods. These are things that we sometimes have. These are things that we have very little of. It's very treat-like. It's a big deal to eat this because most of the time we eat that.
I
if that
love
makes
that.
sense. Yeah,
So
I know.
what would be an example of an anytime food or a sometime food?
Yeah, so anytime food is a fruit or a vegetable. So those, so even if it's outside of snack time and you want an apple, that is not a problem. Or some celery or carrots or whatever. That's free flowing. You can help yourself. They're washed. You don't need, but otherwise we stick to the schedule. And then the sometimes food might be, you know, an ice cream or a cookie, or we do some baking and that kind of stuff. Because understand, when you do the baking, it sits on the counter. So do you, you know, you don't want it to be like a buffet because it's only me and her. So
Right.
we got to put some kind of restriction because usually you make 12 cookies.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We do have another question from our guest. So Karen would like to know how to specifically order a meal at a restaurant to make it healthy. If you were eating like at, let's just say, you know, some of the restaurants downtown that have these really heavy, menus.
Yeah, so my favorite trick is 2 appetizers, which I always enjoy more than a main. So my 2 appetizers would be maybe like my favorite meal at an Italian restaurant, which is typically the hardest because I try to stay away from white flour products. I will get a caprese salad, so the tomato and the cheese and the olive oil, and then I will get grilled calamari. And I just love that combination. Or if I'm really hungry, then I might even add a soup to that. If you go to any restaurant will have like a nice protein, and then you get your vegetables, your salads, your soups on the side. It's okay if the restaurant meal is a bit of a splurge, right? Life should be enjoyed and fun because you want whatever eating plan you choose to be sustainable. The splurge, in my opinion, and in a lot of people's opinion, should be on the fat, not the sugar. So, you know what I mean? So like if you're going out and you don't worry about the dressing on the salad, if it's olive oil, if it's the other ones, they all have sugar, but if it's olive oil, don't worry about it, right? If the steak has a pat of butter, it's okay. What's really going to get you is the sugar and the white carbs.
So I'm hearing it's a theme for you. Stay away from white flour.
Yeah, white flour, white sugar. Yeah,
Yeah, those
white.
white things, yes, stay
Yeah.
away from them. Good. All right. Well, I think we're almost at time. So I want to thank you so much. Sandra, you have given us so much to think about today. This is fantastic. Hopefully I can start fitting into my clothes better soon. And we'll use some of these techniques. And I know our guests have learned a lot. So thank you so much for your time. And thank you to our guests for staying with us. It's been a fantastic 45 minutes. And come back and join us next week. We have our Courageous Conversations on Wednesday with John Robinson Jr. His guest will be announced, I think, early next week. And we have another sense-making conversation on Friday of next week with Marilla D. I am terrible at names, and I will apologize to Marilla. Marilla D. Savita. And she will be speaking to us about making the right choice for difficult decisions require values-based leadership. So she is the president at Papillon MDC and the founder of Grand Heron International. Marilla is an absolutely fascinating guest and will bring huge huge amount of information to this topic, because in speaking with her, she's got 100 different things that she's got on the go in these very areas, and so difficult decisions, I know we're all faced with them right now as we come back from the COVID isolation, and our work and our world start to collide again. So join us next week at 12:30 for another sense-making conversation. And Sandra, thank you again. Any last words as we part?
You know what? Thank you so much. Thank you, Andrea and Talk Boutique, for putting this on. You know, for a lot of people, the sense of community information is a lifeline. So thank you.
Oh, our pleasure. And for all of you, you stay safe, stay healthy, stay connected, and go out and create some intelligent conversations. Take care.